Thank you very much. Maybe a little less. I do have a paper that I will make available so that I don't have to go through everything that I have. But I first want to thank the Kingdom of Morocco and the Planning Commission for giving us this opportunity, and in my case, to give a decidedly specific view, more centered around West Africa and in terms of what is happening here. And the view is this, that the global crisis is definitely putting certain countries in the Tricontinental area at a disadvantage, and that the actions of the wealthier countries, the actions that they are taking to deal with the crisis will drive the less well-off countries to become even less competitive. And so for me, the initiative is an important forum for us to at least discuss the need to reduce the negative impact of the crisis. And we all know that leaders throughout the world, particularly the ones from the developed countries, seem to be of one mind about the current global financial crisis. And that is that this is not the time to sit and do nothing. I agree that getting out of the global crisis is coming out of it stronger is not a spectator sport. It requires action, but action that is based on or preceded by thought and research. And so I see this forum from that perspective, pulling together experiences from Africa, the Americas, and Europe, subjecting them hopefully to some disciplined analysis and picking from them what we can pass on to those with the authority and ability to implement solutions that affect the lives of many in the Tricontinental area. To further develop the point, the Tricontinental area includes countries in Africa that, even though when people talk, are felt not to have been hit hard directly by the global financial crisis, are indeed feeling the negative impact through lost trade and investment opportunities. And if we go to our recent pasts, when we had the food crisis, countries in rice-producing nations, for example, in Asia and elsewhere, restricted the export of the product, and this severely affected West African countries. And in some of those countries, people rioted and nearly caused governance problems. For me, the rice problem is even a smaller one than the global financial crisis, which, if we do not take care to look at it carefully in terms of its impact on some of these countries, we will have even greater problems. And there is one problem that many people perhaps don't want to look at it or not looking at it clearly. I want to give it a name, and it is my view that the global financial crisis has unleashed a certain behavior, a behavior that will put developing countries at a further disadvantage in the global economy. And we have leaders from the United Kingdom and the USA and others that have been telling the rest of the world, do not rush to adopt protectionist policies. And yet they are protecting their insurance companies, the farmers, automobile manufacturers, banks, and their financial markets. They have been saying to us, do not pick winners, but they are deciding which companies to save and to fund. And in America, they did decide that Lehman Brothers, a well-known investment banking firm, can go bankrupt. But then AIG, a giant insurance company that lost over $60 billion in fourth quarter 2008 alone, should be saved. So who is picking winners here? And while on the one hand, they are quick to ask others not to interfere in the private sector, well, in America, the decisions are being made on who should run automobile companies and so on and so forth, and in Europe and in other places. What I want to give a name to is what I am calling this new economic nationalism, which is not being, it is not being practiced in countries in West Africa, but it is being practiced by the people who normally tell us not to do those kinds of things. And this new economic nationalism is symbolized by the American president, Mr. Barack Obama, declaring to the Americans that he would not allow the automobile industry to die in the country that invented this means of transport. So, I'm making the point that the global financial crisis is threatening the jobs and prosperity of Americans, but the American president is doing what it thinks it should do: support its people to stand and compete and protect their way of life. Now, when they have acted to strengthen domestic markets or to provide what has been called stimulus funds, they have justified their actions by saying that strengthening domestic markets will help stabilize the global economy. The Chinese have done it, the Taiwanese have done it, the Japanese have done it, the Australians have done it, the British have done it. Everybody who has the means is doing it. So those who have the ability to protect, strengthen, and support their own domestic financial system, their own indigenous companies, and general trading competitiveness are doing so. What about the rest of the world? Specifically, what about Africa, where the governments do not have the financial wherewithal to support industry and financial markets to improve trade competitiveness and greater investment in productive capacity? This is what is given rise to what I am calling the new economic nationalism. And it is not just fashion, because the actions of the American, British, and other governments will have long-term effects on the rest of the world. So as we consider a tricontinental initiative, we must confront this trend of affairs and find answers that will allow the West African nations and other weaker economies on the Atlantic to participate meaningfully in global trade and investment, especially when, in not so long ago, many of these countries have been told not to do what the Americans, the British, and the others are doing now to protect their own self-interest. So, do I blame them? I can't blame them. But the point is, if it means reordering what we've been discussing, the way we've been behaving over the past few years, then let's talk about how we get these things done. So I just want to conclude by saying that yes, this global financial crisis has given rise to this new form of economic nationalism led by countries like the US, the UK, and others who can afford stimulus money to stabilize their economies, strengthen domestic industries and markets, and in the process given further competitive advantage to their domestic enterprises outside the dictates of what we've called all along market forces. And the weaker economies face the real prospect of becoming weaker and poorer if they themselves do not take the steps to strengthen their internal competitiveness. What I am saying the Tricontinental Initiative can do is to support the needs of the weaker partners by identifying, not handing out monies, but by identifying trade and investment opportunities that can strengthen domestic productive capacities and competitiveness. Because a partnership, we are talking about partnership and cooperation, a partnership cannot work and produce benefits for all if some parts cannot contribute to the welfare of the whole and are just there to be beneficiaries of handouts from time to time. So all I am saying is, let's recognize this new economic nationalism and act appropriately. Otherwise, the weaker will get weaker and become even less competitive than they have been. Thank you very much.